I think we had one or two more. Definitely this one I wanted to get to because I did actually have what I consider to be a good point about this.
We'll see.
Um, you be the judge. But here's the question, and you'll like this one, Ian. So this one comes from Ivan, and it says, given how bad our defensive numbers have been for a very long time now, and how historically bad our top minute munching defenseman in particular is defensively, coupled with how amazing our forwards are and how decent our goaltending has been, and there was, a bracket, like generally speaking, shouldn't the Leafs be focusing on improving the defense as the number one priority? And there's also a bit in there about and looking into trading Morgan Riley, which we just talked about the contract, so I don't want to get into too much. But the overall strategy of acquiring a defenseman over a forward, given the Leafs' overall defensive numbers.
And I do like that idea. And Matthias Ekholm immediately comes to mind because he's the defenseman he's the best one available. He has 2 years of control, and he's on an incredible cap. It was at $3.75 million for a legitimate first pairing defenseman. He's left-handed. He mostly plays the left side. It's been said he can play the right side. I always get a bit hesitant on guys like that because are you actually going to play him on his
puck
right
handling
side?
is a little lackluster. And I know, Kevin, you've been watching Nashville a little bit recently too, and you're probably seeing it. Like he is not smooth with the puck.
He's not. He's more of the defensive defenseman. I know his numbers suggest he's more of an offensive defenseman, but I definitely see him as more of the
You,
defensive stay-at-home type.
you don't want the puck on his stick. I'm telling you. Like
You can live with
I
it
love
on his
Ekholm.
stick. He can make a play with it, but his value is more in what he does without the puck. He's a
Yeah,
fantastic 200-foot impact defenseman over the last few years. Now, those numbers have dipped in the last year or two. Is that something that concerns you if you're potentially trading for him? I mean, maybe you want to make sure that if you're trading for this guy, are you getting a legit Jake Muzzin type of value here? Or is this the Tyson Barrie trade where you're feeling a bit worse? But he's obviously better than Barrie. I'm not going to go out on that limb. But if you're giving up to get an Ekholm, I'd imagine you'd have to give up a Sandin or a prospect of that caliber and a pick. And I don't know what else would go into the trade, but it would be something that most Leafs fans would look at and go, ooh, is this something I want to give up? And I think if you're giving up those level of assets, the question here is, should it be a forward or should it be a defenseman? I think long-term, I like this reader's question because I think long-term we should be looking at defense a bit more because I think we should be looking beyond Morgan Riley in the next couple of years if we're trying to build a proper top four. But at the same time, if you're trying to win a Stanley Cup this season, does bringing in Matthias Ekholm maximize your chances of winning a Stanley Cup versus bringing in a Philip Forsberg or a Taylor Hall or a similarly talented forward? I think it's difficult because eventually one of those players on the blue line is going to be getting fewer minutes than you'd like to see. I remember this when the Leafs traded for Jake Muzzin. The problem was that Ron Hainsey didn't go down the lineup. So you had Jake Muzzin was like, he wasn't playing third
no
pairing
one would
minutes.
play the right side.
Yeah.
That was stunning to me.
If you trade for Matthias Ekholm, what's the ripple effect? Either Dermott or Bogosian comes out of the lineup, conceivably. So who moves down? Who like what do you do with the D pairings at that point? To me, it wouldn't be ideal, but at the same time, having more talent on the ice improves your chances of winning. So I think we should probably be discussing defense a bit more often because I know we all are picturing Taylor Hall or whoever it is on that left wing with Nylander and Tavares. But if you can add a legitimately talented defenseman to this team for the next year or two, I think it matters on that back end because, like you said, I think the blue line is maybe more of a problem than we're willing to admit. But also getting back to Kevin's point, when was the last time we felt this good about a blue line as a Leafs team? I don't think you ever have.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest need is still forward in terms of I want someone to play with Tavares Nylander. I want to get that line fixed. And I think Ekholm's good enough that I'd reconsider. And I think maybe Savard I'd have to at least consider. I think they're good enough players where you have to at least say, okay, what's the cost? And I think I would definitely redo the Jake Muzzin trade. If I had a time machine, I'm definitely doing that trade again. So if the price is the same as Jake Muzzin and you're confident Ekholm's as good as Jake Muzzin, I'm in because I think, you do that trade 10 times out of 10. I just think it might be a bidding war. I think a lot of teams want Ekholm, and I am happy with these 6 defensemen right now. So unless they get a real deal on Ekholm, I would probably just do the forward route. I wouldn't mind adding a seventh defenseman, someone you could sub in. But I think you get the forward first, see how much cap room you have, and then go from there. Like if you have enough for, say, a $2 million guy, then you make that as kind of your last move. Because I do think more than likely these will be the sixth defenseman come playoff time. Of course, there's always injuries, but I just don't think other teams have, amazing seventh, eighth defensemen. I think the Leafs, I really like Sandin. I know it's a bit, they're young. I would, if they are going to play, I want to get into some regular season games, but I think forward for me is a priority unless you get a real deal on a Ekholm or a Savard.
So I have a few thoughts on this, as I always do. And it actually goes back a few years ago to baseball. So big Jays fan, of course. A few years ago, the Jays were unbelievable on offense, right? And everyone knew that they needed pitching. And the first thing that they went out and did that trade deadline was trade for Troy Tulowitzki. And they, of course, got rid of Jose Reyes at the time, who was a reasonable player in and of himself. He certainly wasn't bad, and nobody was really pointing to him being like, get Jose Reyes off the team, whatever the case is, right? And I was confused at the time, too, because I'm like, why are they going in on Troy Tulowitzki? They need pitching, and they did end up getting pitching. But Troy Tulowitzki came here, played one game, which was that Phillies game where he hit 2 dingers, you may remember. And not because of the 2 dingers, but the defense and the overall stardom that he brought right away. I was like, okay, this is why they traded for Troy Tulowitzki. Like, I don't care who they had here before. This guy is just a legitimately better player. And that was kind of a light bulb moment for me across any sport where it's just like, hey, if you have a chance to upgrade your roster, I don't give a shit if you think that this area is a strength or, we can't improve this further. If there's a player that's better and he improves your odds, you get him. End of story. So that goes across the board.
I guess Golden Knights looking at their roster thinking like, oh, I don't know. Do we need an Alex Pietrangelo? It's like, hey, you need good players.
Yeah, why not? But when I look at the forwards in particular and people are like, okay, these guys are scoring, they're offensive, they got all this stuff. I'm not looking going, all right, they're good. What are we doing on defense? I'm actually looking going, okay, they actually need to round out this group a little bit better. I think if we're watching, we can clearly see some holes in them. Like very clearly, they got buoyed by 5 players who are all pretty unreal, right? But now that they're trying to disperse them across 3 lines, we're seeing some of the issues that brings about. To your point too, Ian, they do need a defenseman. They're an injury away from literally any one of the guys in the top 4 to having a problem. Like if one of those guys has a playoff,
say that about a lot of contending teams?
Of course you can, but how many teams are contending to the level of the Leafs right now? How many are Leafs Cup contender status? So when you're
5
in
to
that
10 teams in the NHL,
I would probably say not even that many. 5 for sure, but definitely not 10. That
6,
are
7, 8.
Yeah, probably around there if we really were to look at it. Remember we did that top 10 list teams a few weeks ago?
Yeah, we just kind of did it off the top of our heads. I'm sure if we spitballed it right now, we'd end up somewhere that 6 or 7 number.
I also feel really bad for the Islanders with the Anders Lee injury. But, if you're the Leafs and you're in that top category, which they really haven't been since Pat Quinn was trying to trade for everybody, you have to insulate yourself. Whether it's just a depth guy that, makes it look a little bit better. But honestly, they're one injury away from any one of those guys in the top 4. And for most teams, you wouldn't say that. For most teams, you'd actually be like, if their top guy or their top 2 guys go down, like they have a problem. Like if you're looking and you're, if you're Vegas, you're like, if Shea Theodore or Petro gets hurt, we have a serious problem. But as long as those 2 guys don't get hurt, you could kind of squint and be like, yeah, they'll probably be okay because they have these 2 monsters and they can basically, one of them will be on at all times. The Leafs don't have those monsters, right? Like they have 4 good guys. Yeah, but on defense, they have 4 good guys that each have their own strengths and weaknesses. And, the sum of their parts, they're solid. But any one of those guys gets hurt, they have issues on defense.
If Justin Hall gets hurt, what's the ripple effect?
Who's the righty? Is Zach Bogosian moving up, or is Travis Dermott playing the right side?
I think Bogosian goes with Riley. Brody goes on the shutdown.
That terrifies me.
Right? Things start moving around and they get a little weird really quick. And all these guys start playing with each other who they haven't played with all year in the middle of playoffs when, the lights shine the brightest. I don't know. It doesn't feel great to me. So, Yeah, if I could get a guy 100%, but I would definitely target forward over it because they have a hole on first line left wing. They have a hole on second line left wing. As long as Zach Hyman is playing on the third line. And
Yeah.
if you think otherwise, you're kidding yourself.
I don't know. Joe Thornton, man, those you see those Corsi numbers?
Hey, I love Joe. I just think their fourth line should just be Joe, Spezza, and Simmons. And you move those guys up once in a while when you need to. But like anything else for those guys, I think they're just asking too much. And I actually have like Simmons on the first line, but that's not real.
Yeah, I was gonna say
It's
you
not
can't
real.
play Wayne Simmons big minutes in a top
No.
six in a playoff series at this point.
I don't like that at
Is
all.
No.
5 on
Just
5. No, on the power play, yeah, you like him on the ice. 5 on 5, I think he needs to be sheltered.
I think I just want a needle mover at the deadline first. It's probably going to be a forward. I just think there's more forwards available. And then if you have extra cap space, I'm all in for adding a depth defenseman. But I do think you have to kind of make your bigger move first and then see what's left and go from there. Ekholm is good enough that I think you at least have to inquire, but I do think forward's definitely more likely at this point.
And I think that's realistic.
I would like
Honestly,
even just a depth guy on defense. Doesn't even have to be that good, but like a body that is semi-respectable. Even a guy like Jason Demers, who I don't really love or even like that much, but at least he's played in the league and a little bit better than what they have.